In 2007, Portland, Oregon, Jenna Morrow was put in a high-security psychiatric facility because she attempted to murder her own husband of 8 years, Simon Morrow. The reason why is more sad and horrifying than one could imagine. It started off as something fun, something to laugh about over dinner, or to shake off the chills after a spooky movie night. Looking back, I can pinpoint the night it all began. We had just finished watching a thriller about a stalker, the kind of movie that leaves you checking the locks on your doors and windows before you head to bed. That night, while we were still under the spell of the movie's eerie ambience, my wife Jenna suggested a game. "Let's stalk each other," she said with a grin. "Just for fun, to see who can scare the other more." Her eyes sparkled with excitement, and in the moment it seemed harmless, a playful challenge. The rules were simple. We could use any tactic that didn't involve danger or genuine fear for your life. Sneaking up on each other, leaving unnerving notes in unexpected places, mimicry of scenes from horror films we both knew were nothing but fiction. At first, it was hilarious. I remember hiding in the closet and jumping out just as she was about to open it, both of us bursting into laughter afterward. But a couple of days later, the nature of our game began to shift. One night, I woke up to find Jenna standing by the bedside, just staring down at me with a creepy smile. Her eyes, usually so warm and inviting, seemed hollow, as if she was somewhere far away. "Got you," she whispered, her voice a cold thread of sound in the darkness. I laughed it off, but the image of her standing there lingered in my mind, long after she had crawled back under the covers and fallen asleep. That little bastard really spooked me. I decided to up my game, not wanting to be outdone. I followed her around, took sneaky pictures of her when I thought she didn't notice and sent them to her. She never mentioned the photos. Days went by, and the atmosphere at home grew thicker, charged with a silent tension that neither of us addressed. And for a moment I thought I had crossed a line. Perhaps I had taken it too far and scared her a little too much. Then came the night that changed everything. I woke up to a scraping sound like metal on wood. My heart pounding, I rolled over to find Jenna's side of the bed empty. The sound continued, rhythmic and persistent. I got up, my body taut with apprehension, and followed the noise to the bathroom. The door was ajar and the light was off, but the moon provided just enough light to reveal Jenna sitting on the floor. In her hand was a knife, the blade scraping against the tile as she drew it back and forth. "Jenna?" My voice was barely a whisper. She didn't respond, didn't even seem to hear me. Her eyes were fixed on the blade, fascinated by the sharp, gleaming edge. "Jenna, what are you doing?" This time my voice was louder, firmer. She looked up towards me. She was smiling, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was as if she was staring through me. Slowly, she placed the knife beside her and stood up. "It's your move," she said, her voice eerily calm. "You're freaking me out, Jenna. Stop it," I said. She didn't respond, she just walked past me back to the bedroom. As Jenna slipped back into bed and resumed her gentle, rhythmic breathing, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The game had started as a shared joke, a mutual thrill. Now she was really freaking me out. The next morning, Jenna acted as if nothing had happened. She made coffee and chatted about her plans for the day as if she hadn't spent part of the night sitting on the bathroom floor with a knife. I watched her cautiously. Why did you sit on the bathroom floor with a knife? I asked. What? What are you talking about? She replied. I found you in the middle of the night on the bathroom floor holding a knife. Don't you remember? As I looked into her eyes, that same hollow look from the other night stared back at me. It was as if the woman I loved was slipping away, replaced by someone else. In the days that followed, the game, which wasn't much of a game anymore, began to consume every waking moment of her life. Jenna's behavior became more unpredictable, her once playful tactics now tinged with an unspoken menace. The house, once our sanctuary, turned into a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. I was determined to end this twisted version of stalking we had embroiled ourselves in, but every attempt to broach the subject with Jenna was met with evasion or a chilling smile that once again didn't reach her eyes. One evening, after a tense dinner where Jenna had been particularly quiet, I found my resolve. We need to stop this, I said firmly as we cleared the dishes. This game, it's not healthy for us, Jenna. She paused, a plate in her hand, and looked at me. But I thought you liked it. Don't you find it exciting? Her voice was eerily calm, as if discussing something as mundane as the weather. It was fun at first, I admitted. But now it's going too far. It's changing us, changing you. Jenna laughed, a hollow sound that echoed off the kitchen walls. It's just a game, she repeated, her favorite mantra, but the glint in her eyes was anything but playful. That night, I went to bed with a heavy heart, Jenna's laughter ringing in my ears. I awoke sometime past midnight to a chilling silence. The room was cold, the kind of deep, biting cold that seeps into your bones. I reached out to find Jenna's side of the bed empty again. A sense of dread settled over me as I wrapped a robe around my shivering body and stepped out into the hallway. The house was dark, every corner cloaked in shadows. I called out for Jenna. There was no answer. I walked through the living room, my eyes straining against the darkness, searching for any sign of her. That's when I noticed the back door ajar, a thin sliver of moonlight creeping through the gap. Pulling the door open, I stepped out into the cold night air. The garden was bathed in an ethereal glow, the plants casting long, twisted shadows on the ground. And there, at the far end of the garden, I saw Jenna. She was digging. "What are you doing?" I called out, my voice breaking the night's silence. She didn't stop, didn't even look up, just kept digging. The sound of the shovel biting into the earth was methodical and unsettling. I approached her slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. "Jenna, talk to me, please." She paused then, her back still turned to me. "It's for the game," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "A new level." "A new level?" I echoed, confusion mingling with my growing fear. "Jenna, this isn't a game anymore. You win, okay? You're scaring me. Stop this, please." She finally turned to face me, her face pale and drawn in the moonlight. "That's the point, isn't it?" Her words cut through the cold air, leaving me speechless. I realized then that something was deeply wrong. Jenna wasn't herself, hadn't been for a while. His game had unearthed something in her, something dark and unreachable. "Please come inside," I urged, my voice gentle. "We can talk about this, figure it out together." Jenna looked at me, then back at the hole she'd been digging. Without another word, she dropped the shovel and followed me inside. But the distance between us felt greater than ever, her presence like that of a stranger. The next morning, I called in sick at work. I spent the day watching Jenna, noting every odd behavior, every distant stare. She spent hours looking out the window or walking aimlessly through the house. By evening, I made up my mind to call her sister. Maybe she could get through to Jenna. Maybe she had seen signs of this behavior before. But before I could pick up the phone, my own rang. It was Mike, my best friend since college. "Hey man, you've been off the radar. Everything okay?" he asked, concern lacing his tone. I hesitated, then walked to a secluded area where I thought Jenna couldn't hear me and told him everything. Mike listened in silence, only interjecting to ask a brief question or to reassure me that I wasn't overreacting. "You want to come stay with me for a couple of days?" he asked after I had finished. "A change of scenery might do you good, give you some space to think things through." I glanced at Jenna, who was now sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the turned-off TV. "I think I might just take you up on that," I replied, a mix of relief and guilt washing over me. Packing a small bag felt like the heaviest task in the world. I told her I needed some time to think, but that I loved her and would be back soon. I wasn't sure if she understood, if she even cared at that moment. As I drove to Mike's place, the weight of the last few weeks began to lift slightly. But the relief was short-lived. That night, as I tried to find sleep on Mike's couch, my phone buzzed. A message from Jenna. Just 3 words. "I see you." Quickly after came another message. A picture. A photo of me laying on the couch taken from outside the house through the living room window. The game hadn't ended. It had followed me, even here. Each message from Jenna that night was more disturbing than the last. Pictures of dark corners of Mike's house, each accompanied by texts like, "You can't hide from me." It became clear that this was no longer about who could scare whom. It was about Jenna not letting go, about her slipping further into a delusion she called a game. I spent a restless night jumping at every little sound. Every creak of the house settling felt like a step on the stairs. Every gust of wind sounded like whispering. Mike noticed my unease in the morning. Over breakfast, he tried to convince me to talk to a professional about what was happening, his concern evident in his furrowed brow. He was right. I couldn't deny it anymore. Jenna's behavior was beyond my help. It was something that required professional intervention. We decided to drive back to the house together. I needed to confront Jenna, to try to bring her back to reality or get her the help she needed. The drive home was tense, filled with uneasy silence and rehearsed speeches that evaporated the moment we pulled into the driveway. The house looked the same as I had left it, but now it seemed like a shell, haunted and hollow. Jenna was in the living room, sitting in the same spot as when I'd left, her gaze fixed on the blank television screen. She looked up as we entered, her expression unreadable. "Jenna, we need to talk," I began, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. What you're doing, it's not safe, for you or for me. I think you need help." Before I could finish, she stood up, interrupting me. "Help? I don't need help. It's just a game, remember?" Her calm was unnerving. It wasn't the reaction of someone caught in the act. It was the reaction of someone who believed they had done nothing wrong. "Jenna, this is not a game anymore, if it ever was. You need to see someone," I insisted, my words filled with a desperation I hadn't intended to show. Jenna laughed, a sharp, cold sound that didn't suit her. "I see plenty," she replied cryptically. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the room. Mike and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement that action needed to be taken. We followed her to the bedroom where she had begun packing a bag. "Where do you think you're going?" I asked, a knot of worry forming in my stomach. "To play the game somewhere else. You're no fun anymore," she said without looking at us. It was then that Mike stepped forward. "Jenna, this isn't healthy. Let us help you." For a moment, I thought she would acquiesce, that she would break down and allow us to help her. But instead, she stiffened, her whole demeanor changing. "You don't decide what I need," she said, her voice harsh. After a few hours, we managed to convince Jenna to come with us, under the pretense of playing the game someplace else. But once there, the truth came out. The doctor recommended immediate psychiatric evaluation, given her detachment and delusions. It was a hard decision, but I signed the papers for her to be admitted to a mental health facility for observation. Jenna didn't fight it. She seemed almost resigned, as if she had finally reached the end of her game. Visiting her in the facility was one of the hardest things I've ever done. She was different, sedated and calm, yet there was a glint in her eye that reminded me of the person she had been. During one visit, with Mike by my side for support, she talked to us about her days, about the therapy sessions and how they were pointless because she was fine. She was just playing a game. Then, without warning, her mood shifted. She looked at me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. "You didn't play right. You tricked me. You lied to me." Before I could respond, she lunged at me, a pen she had taken from the doctor's clipboard aimed at my neck. I moved just in time, the pen stabbing into my shoulder instead. The staff reacted quickly, restraining her as she screamed, not like the woman I loved, but like someone else entirely. Mike rushed me to the emergency room, my shoulder bleeding, my mind reeling. I sat there, getting stitched up, trying to piece together where everything had gone so wrong. Jenna was being transferred to a high-security psychiatric facility, her doctors concerned about her aggressive tendencies and clear danger to others. The game was over, but the scars remained, both physical and emotional. I visited her less and less, each time more draining than the last. She never seemed to recognize me, always looking past me as if expecting someone or something else. My love for her never waned, but I realized that the woman I loved might never come back to me. The memory haunts me, the uncertainty of it all, the fear that perhaps the game was real to her in ways I could never understand. And somewhere, in the darkest parts of my mind, I fear the game might not be over, after all. For more scary horror stories, feel free to leave a like and subscribe.